Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new Doctor Who review. A very strange sentence coming from my mouth after so long of not making actual traditional style videos, but here we are. I thought I'd jump back into it. It's the 60th anniversary, we've got some fantastic specials to talk about, and the future of Doctor Who is looking great. I did do a review of the Star Beast, but it wasn't ready before Wild Blue Yonder dropped, so I thought it would make more sense to spend today doing my full review of Wild Blue Yonder to release as soon after broadcast as possible. However, my Star Beast review will be coming very soon, hopefully during this week, if not next week, if not at some point in December, hopefully. But you will see a review for the Star Beast, it just won't be anywhere near the original episode date, because I haven't had the time to do it. This is why I don't do YouTube much anymore. But here we are talking about Wild Blue Yonder, the second 60th anniversary special starring David Tennant and Catherine Tate as the Doctor and Donna. Absolutely unbelievable. If you want to see my sort of rough thoughts on the Star Beast without an official review, by the way, you can check out our weekly live stream, The Who Bulletin, where we talk about all the latest news, reviews, etc. And last week we did a sort of rundown about my opinions on the Star Beast, talking to you guys about all of those lovely little things. And if you want to join in the sort of discussion, the live discussion for the Who Bulletin this week, make sure you jump on to this channel on Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, where we'll be going live talking about Wild Blue Yonder, talking about your guys' opinions on it, your guys' thoughts on it, as well as my own. So yes, I think we should just start talking about it. This was a very interesting episode and there was a lot to kind of go over, especially in terms of initial expectations. They went into this episode showing very little on purpose. They were very keen to not give anything away about the plot, and that obviously opens things up to misunderstanding and potentially overestimating stuff. And I think they're aware of that. Russell himself has acknowledged this in recent interviews, saying that keeping things private and secret may have been a little bit. But I don't think it was. I personally love this episode, and we'll go into that very short. So first of all, my sort of spoiler-free overview, I guess. A lot of people expected this to be the 60th anniversary episode. Obviously we had the Star Beast, which reintroduces all the characters, sort of new story, adapting a 70s comic, and then we have the Giggle with the Celestial Toymaker and the big sort of worldwide threat, and David Tennant regenerating into Shooty. However, this episode was the one that was kept under wraps, so everyone naturally assumed that it was going to be based on like another TARDIS, that Matt Smith was going to appear in it, Peter Capaldi was going to appear in it, a bunch of other cameos and things, and it wasn't. A lot of people who I've seen genuinely disappointed with the episode. There's very few people who are just like, well, I wasn't keen on it, and that's completely fair enough, but a lot of people obviously went in with the expectation of seeing all these returning cast members, all these familiar concepts, but what it actually ended up being was something a lot more character-focused, a lot more horror-based, and a lot more just a standalone story in the middle of these specials. And it depends on your personal preference, but I would like to call Wild Blue Yonder, and I wasn't the first to coin this idea, but almost like the Last Jedi of the 60th anniversary specials. It's the one that everyone expected to have all these sort of things. When people went into The Last Jedi, they expected Luke Skywalker to come in and pull down a Star Destroyer with the Force and save the day and all that sort of thing, but what it actually ended up being was more of a nuanced character tale. It wasn't perfect, but it was not what people expected, and I think because people got their expectations and their hopes up for something that was more of a cameo-lenient kind of episode, they were disappointed with what actually was something decent, but they couldn't really look past their own expectations. And I think that's going to be the problem with this episode. Because of their choice to keep it secretive, and also their choice to go with the Doctor Who magazine article where they kept 3 character names redacted. Now, obviously now we can just assume that those 3 character names were Bernard Cribbins, and then David Tennant and Catherine Tate again, to kind of play on that. But we're never going to know, because that's in print, and that's always going to be there. So it's a very difficult one to sort of get around. However, I did think that the episode does deserve appreciation for what it did actually do. It doesn't have to be a big cameo fest. A lot of TV shows and films focus nowadays on just overloading everything with cameos, and I think the one standalone thing that I liked about this is that it wasn't that at all. It rejected that idea, it rejected the fact that the 60th has to be this, 5-10 Doctors like reunion kind of thing for the sake of seeing those actors interact. As exciting and as fun as that would have been, that obviously wasn't the idea of the story. We've got Catherine Tate and David Tennant for 3 specials here, and you want to utilise their time together as much as possible, because it might be the last time they're on screen together as the Doctor and Donna. It might not be, but it also might be. So you don't want to look a gift horse in the mouth almost and just be like, well, okay, we'll pile in loads of other actors into this episode. I think it was very smart of them to go for something a lot more nuanced and character driven, and I really enjoyed that. Talking about the plot itself, let's talk about the ship and the whole atmosphere of it. I think the story being so well hidden and being a mystery to not only the audience but also to the Doctor and Donna, I think made for great television. I think there's a lot of elements in here which work really well. I love the fact that deep down it was a horror concept. This is very Midnight-esque or Silence of the Library-esque, where it sort of takes this sort of creepy idea and plays on it, and I think that's definitely elevated by the direction, the acting, and especially the music as well, which we'll talk about in a bit. But in terms of the plot itself, the way it all kind of comes together, what opportunities it opens itself up to in terms of character moments. Again, we'll get into this in just a bit, but the Doctor talking about the flux and the timeless child, Donna just that desperation to get home, that talking about her family and her experience. The relationship between the Doctor and Donna is so important and so electric that this episode just works on that. It looks at what they've got and goes, well, let's just make this about them, and I think that was perfect. Even the monsters are trying to replicate these characters that we know and love, and the audience is almost alongside the Doctor and Donna trying to work out who is who, and I think that is really, really engaging and clever, and it doesn't feel out of place at all for Doctor Who. It feels like this would have slotted really well into Series 4, honestly. You could probably swap out this and like Midnight, or and it would work immensely well. Like, the concept of them just being there and having this, it works. I've got no notes for the story at all. I absolutely loved it, and I think every part of it was engaging, and it was used incredibly well as a device to get us into these conversations and these situations, and also have a bit of fun with the effects, which again we'll talk about in a minute. But characters, let's talk about characters individually. The Doctor was excellent in this episode. David Tennant is a phenomenal actor. There's no shock or surprise to anyone. He is a phenomenal actor, and we are so lucky to have him be the Doctor, not only for the first time round, but this time round as well. I love the nuances and the differences in this performance compared to how he was as the 10th Doctor. I genuinely, and I'll say this in my Starbeast review, and I'll say this anywhere, I don't feel like it's the same Doctor. I genuinely feel like there is a difference between them, and I really, really like that. There's an element of, just even within the dialogue and the performance, whether it be the costume and the way Tennant holds himself and performs, I think is slightly different. It is a bit more nuanced, and there is slight differences there. I do like how this Doctor comes with less trauma, but what I did enjoy looking at in this episode was the references, of course, to the Timeless Child and the Flux. I think just... And again, I don't want to use this as a platform to slag off Jodie's era, because I think a lot of the concepts and performances in that era were good as well. And Jodie Whittaker, I thought, was a great Doctor. I really enjoyed her in that role. But it goes to say there was something, maybe a small spark, which was missing. When I watched this, we get 2 mentions of the Timeless Child and Flux, and David Tennant is just powering with emotion and trauma, and I just didn't feel that in the actual era that these story beats were conceived in. You've got Jodie Whittaker, who is excellent, but I don't think was written and directed in such a way for those last 3 specials that she had, Eve of the Daleks, Legend of the Sea Devils, Power of the Doctor, to really be reeling off the effects of the Flux. It was just kind of went, oh yeah, the Doctor fixed it and reversed it all. Whereas actually this is getting clever. Obviously it's very similar to Russell's approach to the Time War, the Doctor having very deep-seated trauma, which he doesn't want to talk about, but I think it's something that he quite enjoys doing with his writing, with characters, and I think also just using this as a device, it made me happy, even though I didn't really love the Flux series. I really respect that they're respecting the continuity, and the fact that this is the same universe, is the same thing that's happening, it's a continuation, and if you watch it all in one, it will be more rewarding. But you can also still follow it as a casual viewer as well. You can watch it and be like, oh, there's some trauma there about something. And that's especially when we come into the new series with Ncuti Gatwa and Ruby Sunday. With Ruby Sunday, we know is going to be adopted, so we know that they're acknowledging the Timeless Child, about the Doctor being adopted and being like a foundling, and they're going to do something with that, and that's going to be a really relatable point between him and Ruby. Maybe they won't delve into it that much, but by acknowledging it in this episode, when they really didn't need to at all, it just says a lot about how Russell not only wants to keep the story going and the continuity safe, but also respects the work of his predecessors, Chris Chibnall, and obviously Stephen Moffat as well. Donna, Catherine Tate, was again incredible in this episode. Catherine Tate, again, known for a lot of her comedy work, and we know through Doctor Who, she is an incredible actress. She can completely command a scene, whether it be comedy or serious. Like at the end of the episode, when Donna's left on the ship by herself, and the Doctor takes the wrong Donna with her, there is such the emotional weight of that very short scene, no dialogue needed. She just accepts it as soon as she realizes it's zero and the button's pressed and the explosions start. There is fear, there is dread, and then there's acknowledgement and letting herself be at peace, as scared as she is. And then the relief when the TARDIS arrives is just unbelievable. The emotional weight behind not only Catherine Tate but David Tennant, and the way they work together as a pair is just incredible. Like, this episode plays to their strengths, and again, it's not dissing off any other era. I'm not going to say that about anything. It's not a dig at Jodie Whittaker or any particular thing. I just can't imagine any other pairing in recent years of Doctor Who being able to pull this off. Capaldi's excellent, but all the dynamics are different. I think this only works with the Doctor and Donna. That emotional weight, that fear, that dread, but also that companionship of the two of them, so powerful, and just scene-stealing performances. I can't express how much emotion I felt for the first time in a long time with Doctor Who, and not just in terms of happy or sad emotion, but also fear and comedy at the same time. And then we'll talk about the No Things, the monsters in this episode, which I don't believe were named, but I think were kind of coined as the No Things. They were incredible, and again, given away by how brilliant David Tennant and Catherine Tate were as performers. To be able to pull off both of these roles incredibly well just speaks to the talent behind the pair of them. The monsters were creepy. I love the idea of it. It's very body horror-esque. We've had doppelganger episodes before, like in Series 6 with the Almost People, the Rebel Flesh, but this is different. And I enjoyed this weirdly more, because it wasn't like a thing where it's with the Rebel Flesh, it's like they wanted to sort of be real and be seen on the same level as human, but they weren't inherently evil. Whereas this time they were, and that was scarier. There was no reason. They just got shaped into this sort of evil atmosphere, and there was no reason behind it. They just were creepy and evil, and they relished off that. They relished off scaring the Doctor and Donna, which made it all the more scary for the viewer. I wasn't sat there quivering, not able to look at the screen scared, but I've not felt the goosebumps of fear from Doctor Who probably since Hyde, maybe. I genuinely don't know in recent years whether there's been an episode that's made me feel actually give off a sort of fear response in terms of an episode. But then also it's really funny, because it's a really weird balance you've got where it actually is scary and frightening, because you're confused as well as an audience member, but then you're watching them and they're just unable to. I don't know what it is. It's just excellent. The comedy of the elongated limbs and the jaw and the big hands and stuff like that, and the chase sequences and the upside down Doctor when he goes on his back and the melting Donna, these are funny moments. Inherently they are quite funny visuals, but they're done in such a way with the performance and the writing, and again the music, which we'll talk about in a minute, that I think really works to its benefit. I think it's sort of funny, and I'm sat there laughing, but I also feel a little bit on edge, a little bit nervous. And this episode gets that balance bang on. This is what scary Doctor Who should be like. It should have that element of comedy. It should have that element of but you should be able to see how the characters are tested, how the characters are scared, and I think you really get that with this episode. Not just scared by a monster, but scared by themselves, creatures that are slowly assimilating to become the Doctor and Donna, and I think that is scary, because you really feel the threat of this. And on another note, this isn't really to do with characters or anything like that, but I just didn't really mention it in the plot. The scene where the Doctor and Donna are standing on the edge of the universe, and he's sort of talking about it and putting his hand on the glass, and there's this eerie synth music that Murray Gould puts in. It's just incredible. It is so, that in itself, before the creatures are even introduced, that idea is haunting. The concept, the human concept, we can't understand that the universe has an edge, and then being able to see past that edge. And it's explaining that in a way which is scary. In the visuals and production area, I think the writing and directing was excellent. I've already talked a lot about that. The dialogue was brilliant, the performances were great, and the directing was fantastic. The one thing that I do criticise about this episode, which I think does bring it down a little bit, and I think especially as time goes on, will be a bit of a detriment to it. As brilliant as it was, the CGI was up and down at times, and that's fine to admit. It is still a BBC show, even with a Disney budget or whatever. I just think some of the concepts were a little bit too out there. The long hallway is such a creepy idea, and I love seeing this like endlessly long hallway. But it was so big and bright and white that it just kind of took away from the vibe of the rest of the episode. You've got these sequences which are set in small, dingy, dirty rooms. You've got like dark, poorly lit corridors, again where the metal is rusty and it feels like a sort of dank old ship that's just been sat and rotting. And I think that's brilliant. And then you get this big white, super pristine, clean, polished area in the middle of the ship, and it doesn't feel like it matches the rest, where the horror is elevated by the creepy dark vibes and the small scale rooms, that element of claustrophobia with those small net rooms and two characters, and you don't know who's real and who's a thing. And then you've got this big wide open space corridor, which I don't think matches, again, the claustrophobic horror based vibe of the rest of the episode. I think it works for a lot of sequences, and you get a lot of the, obviously you get the final climax in there, but I think because it's so big and expansive, not only does it feel like they're on a green screen, which obviously they are, it sort of feels too clean, it feels too polished. It's the same effect that I have with Attack of the Clones, and I don't think any of it looks terrible per se, but I think it looks like it could be dated in a few years' time, and I feel like a shame, because I feel like, the corridor sequence could have been smaller and it would have fit the rest of the vibe of the ship. Whenever they walked onto a practical set, it felt completely different, and those were the best bits of the episode for me. When they're on a big CGI set, it's kind of like, okay, as cool as that is, I'm like, I kind of want to get into the small areas again, because they were way more entertaining, and fit the vibe better, personally. And there's a couple of shots with the TARDIS when the fake Donna got taken away by the Doctor. The TARDIS dematerializes, and when it comes in fully, and it's not like the opacity's not like dripping away, it looks strange. It looks like a very low res render model version of the TARDIS, and I'm not really sure how I feel about that. It was great, and again, this is just nitpicking at this point. But then when it comes to the monsters as well, they have to be weird. The jaw extending, the arms and stuff, which were practical. I love that they blended practical elements with that. They didn't have to, but they did, and it was brilliant. But then when they're like massive and crawling along, or when they're like running on all fours, I think it works, because these monsters aren't comprehensible by humans. We can't understand what these are. They're not given an explanation, which is what the best Doctor Who monsters are like, in the sense of like Listen or Midnight. When you can't really understand a monster, it takes away from it. They're trying to assimilate, but they don't need to. They're trying to also scare the Doctor and Donna, and I think that's important as well. So I don't mind the CGI being a bit goofy around the monsters, because that is the point of them. They're able to morph and change in mass and size, and they're still trying to understand how these bodies work. And I think that's super interesting. I think it's just when it comes to the bigger, more CGI sets, I was sort of thinking, it's a shame they didn't go with like a smaller, more claustrophobic vibe. Personally, for me, that would have been better. But again, it's a very minor criticism, but I did think the CGI in time will date itself and it will age, but that's fine. You get that with a lot of Doctor Who, and I'd rather take this than not having enough money to do anything major. You know, like Evil of the Daleks, love that episode, but it did feel like it was a budget saver based in just like one warehouse, and it was, more than likely. And this was obviously the budget saver episode, yet they still did big expansive CGI shots and stuff, and I think that's great. The ship looked great, floating in space, all that looked amazing. So yeah, I can't knock it too much, but it was just that big corridor bit that I was a little bit like, not sure. The music, Murray Gold is incredible. I will always go down on this. Like, Sega Nakanola was great, Murray Gold is great, but Murray Gold provides in this episode. The score is eerie and creepy and very like interstellar-y. It very much has that ethereal feeling of like being on the edge of the universe, that creepy sort of vibe, which I think, you know, Murray gets a bit of a rep for having just the same bits played over and over again, but all of this score was mostly unique. You had a few motifs there for Gallifrey, a little allusion to the Segon's Flux theme, amongst a few other things as well, with like Donna's main motif from A Noble Girl About Town. But for the most part, the score was way more synthy than Murray Gold usually does, way more creepy and eerie. That sort of rising tension violin, it's obviously something that's used a lot in a lot of media, but it was properly scary. This episode would not be as good if it wasn't for the music, and I think that's where Murray Gold stands out, is he is able to elevate not only performances, but the quality of whole episodes by creating the right score for it. This needed something synthy and, out there, but also subtle, and then scary for those moments where there is rising tension. It does feel genuinely scary, and I'm like on the edge of my seat watching it. I've watched it twice now, the episode, and at both times the music is just incredible, especially when the Doctor takes Donna away. That scene with the music, when he realises he got the wrong Donna, he's pulling the TARDIS, the music there just swells, and it's that action adventure, that feeling of like excitement, and that time is running out, and they get it just in the nick of time. And I think that's just incredible, all those elements, and the music elevates that. I think Segan Akinola was great. I'm not going to use it as a platform to diss him. I think a lot of his stuff was excellent. I genuinely do. I think it fits the era, and I love a lot of his motifs and themes and ideas within his music. But this episode was excellently scored, and I can't knock it at all. I absolutely adore it, and I cannot wait for this to eventually release whenever it does. I'd love to hear official versions of all these tracks, because this episode sounded incredible. In terms of Easter eggs, there wasn't many Easter eggs in this episode, but there was the Flux and the Timeless Child, so we'll briefly touch upon that. The effect that had on the Doctor was just incredible to see, and I've already talked about how the emotional weight of Tennant's performance, as well as the writing and direction around that, gave me more feeling emotionally than the actual Flux series did, or series 12 and 13 managed to do about the Timeless Child, which is not, again, a diss on that. They were excellently handled, and I still like what they did with it. Their concepts are still belong to Chris Chibnall and the Jodie Whittaker era, but I do like how not only are we addressing it for continuity, but we're sort of moving forward with it and actually utilising that idea, not just going, well, that was pointless, let's ignore that, but actually going, what about this concept can be reworked and used for this new era? We're not forgetting about anything that's been put in, we're just kind of acknowledging it and moving forward. I mean, we had like Carvanista, a little plush of Carvanista appear in the last episode as part of Rose's memory, so that's interesting. But what I'm more interested to see is just like how the effects of the Timeless Child, the Doctor not being from Gallifrey, and the Flux have. I actually was so sold by the idea of it in this, because when it's written well, when it's directed well, and you get that gut punch of emotion, it brings that mystery back to Doctor Who. Yeah, the audience didn't know anything about Doctor Who and his origin and his mystery, and that was part of what made it so exciting. But now the Doctor doesn't either. I like that. I've always liked that idea, but now it feels like, okay, now we're getting that. Maybe they're not going to explore it. Maybe it's just a little reference that they wanted to put in there to acknowledge it and kind of give a view as to where the Doctor's mental state is with the Flux, with the Timeless Child. I never even thought that the Flux would have emotionally affected the Doctor. You sort of see that like a bit in Flux, but after Flux we haven't seen anything. But I just love that, again, these things are being referenced, and I can't deny, even though that I didn't love the Flux as a series, when I'm sat there watching it, when they said it, I was like, oh my god, they're doing this. Like, we knew they were going to reference it in this episode, that was already kind of said, but to actually hear them say, like, the Flux, and reference the fact that he's not from Gallifrey, I'm like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted, this is perfect. Oh, I love it, I absolutely love it. So yeah, in conclusion, I'm going to give this episode a 9 out of 10. It was almost perfect for me, and if I could give a 9.5 I would, but I'm not going to get into halves and all that sort of thing. I genuinely think this is probably one of the best episodes of Doctor Who in recent years. It's got everything from phenomenal performances, great writing, great directing, phenomenal music which elevates it, and like that genuine feeling of like horror when watching it, that excitement that I haven't felt with Doctor Who in a long time. I love the Star Beast, but this easily tops it for me. The CGI is probably the only criticism I can give, which kind of lets it down. But that's all to do with budget and being adventurous, and I'd rather them try and be adventurous and make it look how they want it to look, you know, than them have to make budget cuts and make things look a bit naff. Those sequences were amazing, and it's so high concept and so like creepy body horror-esque. The whole thing was just a beautiful blend of drama, horror and comedy, and everything just mixed into one. And the final thing, of course, I want to mention as well is the ending with Bernie Cribbins. As much as it's very sad to see that that's his very last scene and we might not see any more of him in the giggle, it's incredible to see him back. And the joy I felt seeing Bernie Cribbins as Wilf again was just incredible, especially since, of course, he's passed away now. It's really amazing to just see that and have that moment there. I kind of always wanted Wilf to rock up again at some point since he left. I was one of those characters who I think everyone loved. So it's just great to have had that chance and for him to pop up. I was a bit worried that he wasn't actually going to be part of the specials, even though they had filmed with him. I was worried that he may have died and they didn't have everything they wanted and they couldn't find a way to work him into it. But I'm so glad we got this scene. And if we get anything next week, either referencing Wilf or seeing Wilf, then amazing. And if we don't, then that's absolutely fine as well. Like, this is just, it's great to have this, considering I think he passed away like about a year ago, maybe over a year ago. I think, yeah, over a year ago. It's amazing just to see this and to see this scene with him, and it's just, yeah, it was really, really nice and special and a really like heartfelt moment. And yeah, the ending was brilliant. I can't wait to see what happens in the giggle, but for that, we're going to have to wait for next week, and I'm very, very excited about that. Thank you so much for watching my review of Wild Blue Yonder. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think about Wild Blue Yonder in the comments below. Were you disappointed that there wasn't any cameos? Were you disappointed in just the quality of the episode? Or did you really enjoy it? Did you really think it was one of the best episodes of Who in a while? Or somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments below. And if you are craving for some more of my Doctor Who content, then we're going live every single Tuesday at 7 PM talking about the latest episode, and then any sort of news, reviews, updates, any little things we can talk about. This Tuesday we'll also be talking about Wild Blue Yonder, but we'll probably also be talking about the recent announcement for the Christmas special, including new photos, plot points, etc. I'm very, very excited, because next week we're going to get another regeneration, and we are going to see Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor. And to think that's actually happening in less than a week is so exciting. So, yeah, can't wait. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Hopefully see you all next week. And yeah, keep an eye out for the Star Beast review.